Hi everyone, Tarun here. Quite excited about doing this video. So in this video, I'll be talking about the role of a software developer in a deep tech company and what the expectations would be. That it starts with us asking, what does the word deep tech even mean? Deep tech is the technology which is built basis, solid research. Or in a way, deep tech is, you consider a company to be a deep tech company when the technology which is built has a significant entry barrier because of the research which they have done. So it's not easy for somebody else to copy it because there's significant amount of research which has led to an understanding of how the technology is supposed to be built. So now when you're building a deep tech product, the features are not very straightforward. So generally, as a developer, we tend to engage in what is called 1 to N innovation. So there is 0 to 1 innovation and 1 to N innovation. In case you guys have read the book 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, I'm sure you'd relate that there's one thing to make the first such product in the world, and it's another thing to make more photocopies of that product, right? So when you're engaging in 0 to 1 innovation, it's not a copy-paste product. There's no such precedent anywhere in the world. So things are bound to be a little counterintuitive. So when things are counterintuitive, decision making becomes a little problematic. So you need a developer who can thrive in such an environment. Now, what will help you in thrive in such an environment? What is the process? That's exactly what we'll be explaining in this video. So as I mentioned, it's counterintuitive. Now, one might also suggest that in a deep tech company, the product team comes up with the wireframes, and when the wireframes are put out, the software developer's role is to just go and execute. But the practical level observation is that this is far from true. That in reality, what happens is so much is still left to the developer for his or her own interpretation. Because if I'm trying to make a replica of some other product which already exists, right? So there's a product which already exists in healthcare, and I want to make the same product for education. That's still a copy-paste product, maybe a different use case. So when I'm doing something like that, it's quite possible that we can come up with watertight wireframes, as in the wireframes are foolproof, everything is clearly written down, the developer follows it word by word, and the product comes out. But if you're building the first such tech in the world where such a feature doesn't exist anywhere, then it is quite difficult to come up with such watertight, wireframes. So much is still left to the developer for his or her interpretation. So as a result, we expect that the developers are soaked into the philosophy of the product. Because if the developers are immersed into the philosophy of the product, then the developers will be able to make those decisions, and the developers will also be able to understand the product and break the product into tiny chunks. I'll give you an example. At DeepThought, we've been building a fantastic product called DeepThought, which can completely change the way the world recruits people. So DeepThought is a product which can completely change the way recruitment happens. The problem is DeepThought doesn't have a precedent. I think the closest product to DeepThought is probably a Google form. So it comes close to a Google form. It's kind of a abstraction of a Google form into a more general format. So the team which was actually working on this DeepThought was literally struggling, even if the wireframes were given, because the way your brain works is your brain takes that idea, breaks it into tiny chunks, and processes those little chunks at once. And then again, your brain assembles those chunks together. So as a developer as well, that's the tendency of how you think about it and how you do it and how you evaluate whether what you've done is in lines with what the expectation was. So it then becomes very important for the developer to be able to go into the details of the idea, to understand the business context. Why are we building this product? What happens with this product? Who is the user of this product? How does the user benefit from this product? So this kind of curiosity and this kind of collaboration becomes extremely important. So I believe I've already now touched upon the mindset which is required for somebody to work as a software developer in a deep tech environment. So you need someone who can collaborate with others, because unfortunately what happens is many of the good software developers are probably consider themselves introverts, probably were not allowed to express as much in school. But when you're building innovative products, it's very difficult for you to do it alone. You need a team. A lot of brainstorming becomes extremely important to know what that feature represents, and also what is the best way to execute that feature and so on. So you'd want someone who enjoys brainstorming and who's able to translate all that understanding from brainstorming into execution. And of course, you want someone who's extremely curious, who can ask a lot of questions. So besides the technical skill set, these behaviors and mindsets become extremely important, which is why companies like Amazon, they use something called behavioral selection process for identifying people. So because behaviors and leadership are high on their list when they look for hiring developers. So DeepThought as well, while hiring our interns, we're extremely careful about the kind of people we're picking up. We'd like to pick those young, ambitious, curious ones who are always reflecting, always introspecting, and who have that personality which gets super excited with ideas. So we've developed a very interesting selection process to identify individuals who can, fit into deep tech environments. And I would be presenting those two selection processes right now. So this is our selection process for backend. So initially we give them our documentation and we ask the applicant to write an API. So because this is typically what a developer does in the company, at least an intern does in the company, that you get the documentation of what that API is supposed to be doing. And at DeepThought, we were trained our TPMs to understand, our technical product managers to understand how to do API documentation. So if someone already comes and gives you the documentation, you should be able to execute the APIs accordingly. So this is a level 1 challenge we have given. Level 2 challenge is we have given the requirements, of wireframe and the description of that wireframe, and the backend developer is supposed to write the API documentation for it. So if you see this challenge, it's very beautiful because it's about how can I read this document without talking to anybody, How can I read this document, understand what that feature is supposed to do, and then write the API documentation. Like whatever you see here is the API documentation of what is the kind of an API is it? Is it getting information? Is it getting information from the back end to the front end, or is it pushing information from the front end to the back end, and so on? That's basically what it's doing, and we are expecting people to come up with API documentation. So what are the 2 tasks we've given? One task is to create documentation. So if somebody from the product team comes and gives you a wireframe and explain, are you capable of writing the documentation? So that's one part. And the second part is, if the documentation is already given to you, are you able to, execute the product accordingly? Because we've noticed for most of the backend developers, the challenge really lies in writing the documentation, because again, it's about a comprehension thing, right? Are you able to understand what the product is trying to do? If you understand what the product is trying to do, the actual coding or actual execution is much easier. But unfortunately, I think in the Indian context, when we have largely a rote learning oriented approach of education, most people struggle in this comprehension bit. But even those who come from the so-called CBSE or international schools sometimes struggle, because it's about your exposure to abstract thinking, right? If you're exposed to a lot of abstract thinking, you'll be able to comprehend these ideas much faster. But I think I'm super excited about the front-end recruitment process, because we've explained this product called DeepThought. So DeepThought is a product where recruiters can come and design their own kind of a selection process. So the selection process consists of several tasks. So a recruiter can give you a project to complete, and that project will have multiple tasks. So each task can have assets. So what is an asset? You can say an asset is a form of expression. You can express as a video, you can express as an article, you can express as a quiz, and some other formats we have called thread builder, eagle builder, and so on. So this is a DeepThought where a recruiter can say, hey, I want you to give a video, then I want you to give a quiz, then I want to give an article, and so on. So they can give some tasks for people to complete. So this is one particular part of the DeepThought called applicant storyboard. So in the applicant storyboard, the applicant can see all the assets which the applicant is supposed to be creating. So the applicant sees all the assets which the applicant is supposed to be creating. So here we have just given the Figma mockups and we've given screenshots of the Figma mockups. So in this selection process, the applicant is supposed to be executing this as HTML CSS code. So there's a Figma mockup which is given. As you can see here, this is the Figma link. So the applicant is supposed to download this Figma file, and you can easily convert the Figma file into HTML CSS. That's the beauty of doing the design through Figma. So the applicant has to convert that Figma file into HTML CSS code. That's basically task 1. Task 2 is the applicant has to now write the JavaScript code for the dynamic actions on the page, because all these elements, the asset elements, come from a JSON object. So ideally what happens is this has to come from APIs, right? But again, if you want to do API integration, you have to run a server, you have to run a local server and then you have to do the API integration. But when we hire interns, for a lot of interns, learning how to run a server can become challenging. So our team came up with a nice idea. They said, okay, fine, let them declare a local variable and we will give you the JSON object to enter in the local variable. This is kind of like hard coding, but this is not hard coding. So you're putting a local variable. So later on, when you learn how to, if you finish this process, right, the selection process and join DeepThought, then our backend developers will show you how to run a local server and how to do the API integration. Then you'll just replace that variable and put the API there. So this is how we've designed a very interesting task. So in this task, we are seeing your ability to understand the documentation which is given, to understand what is the feature at hand, to be able to convert the Figma into HTML CSS code, and to be able to write the dynamic actions which are required on the code. So as written in the introduction, the comprehension of documentation, aesthetic sense, and the logic. These are 3 very important qualities for a front-end developer at DeepThought, and that is what this task tries to measure. So be it the front-end task or the back-end task, both of them test your understanding of, are you able to read the documents and understand what is the task in the documents? Your real-world problem solving is what they're assessing, because we'd like to hire somebody who's super excited and super passionate about the kind of problems which DeepThought is building, because DeepThought aims at being a PaaS company, platform as a service company, where Byju's, Vedantu, or any of these large guys in the future, if they want to, transform the learning experience like an MIT Harvard learning experience, they can use DeepThought products and integrate the DeepThought products into their product, or they can do development of their features using the DeepThought platforms, so that they bring in that psychology and pedagogy layer which we are adding into our products. So we wish to be a PaaS company which gives the infrastructure for other people to build edtech products, give infrastructure to other people so they can build edtech products using our infrastructure. We don't just wish to be an edtech company, but we wish to be a deep tech PaaS platform in education space. So naturally, the thought process of technology here at DeepThought is very abstract, very ambitious, and very exciting. So we look for people who are excited about the vision. And of course, humility and learnability are very important. How humble you are and are you willing to learn? Unfortunately, somebody who learns to write even 2 or 3 lines of code becomes very arrogant, but that doesn't suit us. We look to hire those curious, excited people who enjoy being in discussions, who enjoy coding, who enjoy building products. Such people have done really, really good job at DeepThought. And most of our interns at the end of a 6 months internship program are as good as somebody with 2 to 3 years of work experience, our CTO Hariharan. So if you think you're the curious, excited person, go ahead, complete the selection process. And I'm sure I'm excited to meet you too. So complete this task and leave a message on the WhatsApp group so we can get in touch and we can start a conversation. Thanks a lot for listening to me patiently, and I hope you enjoy the selection process.